Hello everyone, it's Shel from Paper Rock TO Studio, and today I'm sharing with you what I made for the hashtag event sponsored by Creative Arts Collaboration. This is hashtag Love Spring Art 2017, and it's all about spring art. You can use that hashtag in any search bar and you'll come up with lots of creative content from people who belong to the Creative Arts Collaboration. So I have some new paper. It's called Yupo. Never had it before. It's kind of a plastic. It's interesting stuff. It's supposed to be for watercolor, but today I'm using alcohol inks in very bright colors. And because spring is all about flowers, I started out with this flower stencil. I saw someone on joggles.com doing this, and I thought the effect was really cool, so I decided to try it. So I just taped down the stencil. It's a Crafter's Workshop stencil, I believe, and I'm just dripping different bright colors in the spaces. And then I'm going to spritz it with alcohol a little bit. I have some 91% isopropyl alcohol in one of those misters, and then I'm going to set it aside to dry and move on to the next piece. I took this large piece of Yupo and cut it into quarters, thinking I would make some cards today. So for my next one, I'm going to use it with some acrylic paint from Pebeo. These are the Dyna iridescent paints. And I'm watering it down substantially, making it very fluidy, and then applying it to the Yupo. The effect of this is that as long as you keep that water wet, what you get from the bloom of the alcohol ink isn't regular. If you just drip it on there, it blooms out in very circular shapes like spots, and I think that this effect is a lot more organic, so I like using it with the watered down acrylic paint. So here in Tucson, Arizona, our spring blooms are of course on cactuses, so in that case I was trying to make a prickly pear cactus with bright blooms on it. Everything's bright and super bright, pinks and oranges and yellows when we do have blooming here in Tucson, Arizona. So then I saw the copper paint and I'm like, oh, I love that copper paint. I would eat that copper paint if it tasted good. I love it so much. So I decided to use it watered down again on the Yupo and then dripping some different colors onto it. And again, I'm still trying to make flowers. So I decided to use the green by kind of like dragging it rather than dropping it, trying to make some stem and leaf shapes as well. Should the background be copper? I don't know. And then I dripped just some plain alcohol in the centers to get them blooming a little bit more and a little more irregular shapes. And then stopped the blooming by using my heat tool. If you're going to use a heat tool, keep it far away from the paper and don't keep it in one spot, keep moving it around. You could do the same thing with just blowing on it. I just wanted it to dry quicker so that the blooming would stop, because as long as it's wet, it's continuing to go and go and go. So then I decided to just try some plain white. You know, sometimes you don't want to color in the background, so I tried some plain white acrylic and then just putting some different drops. The alcohol ink in the white, I mean, not the white, the orange, it drips really easy. So I just splattered it rather than applying it very carefully. And then I did spritz it with a little bit of alcohol just to see the effect of that. So I set them all aside to dry and started to work on this one again. This is my prickly pear cactus blooms. And because the green in particular just kept going and going and going. I wanted more white space, and since Yupo is basically a very non-porous surface, I can remove some of the color and create more white space using the alcohol and a Q-tip. So I just dipped the tip of the Q-tip in my little plastic full of 91% alcohol and squeezed out the excess, and then I'm just using it to lift up color around my shapes to give more definition, and then also in the centers of the flowers to give them a little bit more of a flower look, because they have to have centers, and I didn't drip anything in the centers of any of those ones. So then my next thing to do is to add some doodling and definition to my shapes. And I decided to try out my micron pens again. I know that I don't like these. I should just get rid of them. I reaffirmed that I don't like them. But they are a pigment ink in a pen, so they should eventually dry permanent, but they take too long to dry on Yupo, and so I smeared them with my hand because I started with the central shape. I started to define the central shape first, and then as I went over to the left and let my hand sit on it, it smeared. So, bleh, didn't want those pens anymore. But I did just basic doodling, dashes and dots and open dots and just basic, drawing around the shapes, trying to give the idea of them being prickly pear cactuses. If you ever see prickly pear cactuses, you will recognize what these are. The blooms on the top usually aren't that large in comparison, but I haven't figured out, at this point, I hadn't figured out a way to make a smaller drop, to make, the cactuses and then make the blooms a smaller drop, especially because my orange just pours out. I mean, I just tip it over and it pours out like crazy. It's too much. So I think that the next time if I make another one of these, I will like take a toothpick or a straight pin and dip it in a drop, put a drop on my palette of the ink, dip in a pen or a toothpick, and then use that to make a drop. And I think it would be more proportionate with the flower to the cactus proportion, because these flowers are too large. They're not realistic unless these are just the very tips of the plant and it just has little tiny pads on it, and then these would be proportionate. So we're going to go with that. This is the top of the plant. You can't see all the rest of it at the bottom. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So I'm just having fun doodling and adding black lines around, defining the shapes. This is pretty fun. You could get really lost in this and you could do it for a really long time. But I did want to, make a 20-minute video, not a 3-hour video. This is sped up 4 times fast. I'm sure you guys have figured that out. The total time filmed was 1 hour 42 minutes, I believe, before I sped it up. So not going to make you sit through 1 hour and 42 minutes. I know some people like to do that, but for my personal preference, I like sped up videos, so that's the reason that I make sped up videos. And I like voiceovers, so that's the reason I make voiceovers. Each to their own, for sure. So then I brought in my white Posca pen, and another thing that I noticed that I had never noticed before, because I haven't used these micron pigment pens in a long time, is that when I put the white Posca pen, which is an acrylic paint, over the pigment pen, it bled into the pen and made gray. Who knew? I didn't know. I thought that those pens were dry, but I guess they wouldn't ever really dry on Yupo, probably because it's non-porous. So just to let you know, micron pens, not good on Yupo. Posca pens, however, are great. And the next one that I did, I used all Posca pens and didn't mess with any others. I think Pitt pens would work great too, my illustration pens, but I didn't want to use those in case for some reason ink got on them from the paper. It lifted onto the pens, and I reserved them for illustration, and so I didn't want to mess them up, so I just decided not to use them. I have other Posca pens that I can use, and they're not that expensive, but the wallet of illustration pens is more expensive, so that was my executive decision making process right there. So after I finished doing my white highlights, I went back in and used the micron pen again to draw over some of the places where it was gray from the Posca and the micron blending together. So then I took a piece of cardstock and cut it in half to make a card, and I also trimmed down the Yupo piece. I think they end up being 6 inches by I'm going to say 4.5, maybe when I cut them into quarters off that pad that I showed you at the beginning. So they need to be cut down to 4 by 5.25 in order to be a panel on a standard sized card, which goes into what they call an invitation envelope here in the United States. I think it's also called an A2, but numbers between Europe and the United States on envelopes are not the same, or card sizes, not the same. So a normal card here is 5.5 by 4.25. So that's the size of the envelopes as well. So now I'm showing you what happens with the stencil, and I've got a picture coming up of some other ones that I made, but I wanted to show you that I spritzed the stencil after the fact and laid it down on my deli paper, and it made deli paper prints, and I got like 3 of them off of it, cleaning the alcohol ink off the stencil, so I was pretty happy about that. I'll obviously use those. So then I just added, these are simple cards, I added ribbon and a little saying, nothing fancy. I'm not going, I want the pattern of the Yupo design to be the focal point and not like a bunch of embellishments on these cards. So then for my next one, I decided not to even do any lines on it. I just liked it the way it was, so I just left it plain. And then for this other one that I was planning on making flowers out of, I am going to doodle on it using black and white fine tip Posca pens. And this worked a lot better. They dried, they didn't bleed. Definitely more to my liking. So I'm just making whimsical flowers on this one. Making the red and blue drops into flowers of different styles and shapes, and then making the green parts into leaves and stems, even though they bled and bloomed too much to really be the right shapes, but I just modified the shapes using my black pen. So that worked pretty well. I made some petals, I made some lines, some open dots, some closed dots, just doodling and having fun. And I made fat stems on the bottoms and leaves, fat leaves in some cases. I think it's pretty cute. It's whimsical. Obviously, I should have left the panel off the card and done it off the card. I didn't need to put it on the card yet, but I was picking a color for the card, so yeah, I haven't made cards in a long time, and some of my steps got out of order of what would have been logical and practical. But hey, who says I'm logical and practical? I'm not. So I did do some weird stuff. I made some scallops and things around the edges. I don't know. It's hard to describe. You just kind of go with the flow, and you're just looking at the shape and trying to imagine what kind of whimsical flower it would be if it was a whimsical flower. I know you can draw other stuff on these types of backgrounds, but since it was the Love Spring art, I was wanting to do flowers for sure. Because flowers come out in the spring. That's what happens. So once I was happy with my black, I went ahead and used the white as well for highlights again. I have 2 different white pens currently that I'm using. They're the same, but they seem to, neither of them is completely empty, but I need to shake them a lot to get the acrylic ink inside of it blended together to make it turn out white and not just this watery stuff. And so I keep switching off back and forth between them, trying to figure out why one or the other is misbehaving and which one it is, because whichever one it is that I'm struggling with should go in the trash bin, but I never can figure out which one it is. So I just keep switching back and forth between the 2 of them. It's silly. But if you wondered why I had 2 white pens out, it's not because they're 2 different sizes. There are lots of different nib sizes for Posca pens, and it is fun sometimes when you're doing illustration to use multiple pen sizes, but in this case it's just 2 different pens that are exactly the same. And I really think that on this one the bright the brightness comes forward when I add the white. It suddenly looks a lot more fun when I get the white in there. So then to finish it off, I had stamped these Hello Spring little words, but I currently need a sympathy card and a thank you card. So the other ones I'm going to make into a thank you card and a sympathy card instead of Hello Spring. Decided to use some of that deli paper. It's very, very translucent. So I'm putting another white scrap underneath it, just tearing it, making it very not perfect at all. And I decide to attach the deli paper to the white scrap using some of this glitter Mod Podge. Mod Podge. You know we all want to say Mod Podge. It's just natural to want to say it that way. Mod Podge. And then I stuck that on to the panel and trimmed off the excess. And it just, I don't know, it's cool. Now I need to make some more, but I'll have a lot more deli paper than I will Yupo panels looking like this because I got 3 prints of the deli paper scraps cleaning off the stencil and only of course 1 of the Yupo prints. So yeah, I'm gonna have to use those for something. They're cool. So I'm making this one into a thank you note and adding some organza ribbon. Of course, again, my steps are out of order. I should have put the ribbon on before I put the panel down. But I just haven't made cards recently and I just wasn't thinking. So maybe I didn't know I was going to put ribbon on it until after the fact. I don't know anyway. And then I put the ribbon on, stuck it back down again, and then it was too tight because I put the little tie on there and then I had to readjust it. Yeah, it was a comedy of errors for sure. And then for my final one, I'm just going to use some grosgrain ribbon and my last little piece of copper cord. I need to find some more of that copper cord. I love it. I need to find silver too because I need to make some blue and silver graduation announcements. So if anyone knows where to get that super fine metallic cord like that, let me know in the comments below because I need copper and silver. I still have lots of gold left. I got them originally from Stampin' Up! Years and years and years ago, and I've just now used up the copper. So that tells you how long it lasts. So that one got a piece of grosgrain ribbon as well. And then I'm just stamping with Sympathy. Now with the kinds of card bases that I have here, with the exception of the white card base on the thank you note, I need to have an insert. So I'm going to stamp just a plain piece of text paper for the insert on this one. So if you've enjoyed this video, please remember to like, comment, subscribe, share. I want to know that you are enjoying it. I want to know that you're here. I want to hear from you. And also use that hashtag to find some more fun stuff out there on the YouTubes that people have made for you. That's it for me. Thanks. Bye-bye.